Hi everyone, welcome back to Plant It All, and today is the big day. We are going to get those seedlings we set up into the tent for their primary grow. Now, if you've been enjoying this content, I would really appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe down below. It helps promote the channel and helps me get more content out there to more folks. All right, let's not waste any more time here. Let's get over to the tent. All right. We're here at the tent. We're getting ready to transplant our tomatoes and those cilantro seedlings into the baskets and get the primary grow going on. So a couple little things to check off. Make sure you've got all your supplies ready and waiting. This isn't a complicated thing, but as soon as you pull seedlings out of an incubator and you disturb their roots a little bit by lifting up those little cubes of rock wool, you can do damage to the plant. So we want to be somewhat swift, we want to be aware of what we're doing, and we don't want to have to start and stop and then end up drying out our roots and then ultimately damaging or even killing off our plants. So, things you need. You have to have your system up and running. This has been going for a bit. We know it's all nutriated. The Growee is taking care of the pH and the nutrient levels for us. We're happy with this. This is all set. We need baskets. So like I mentioned before, I like using these rather large baskets because what's going to happen is we're going to put our rock wool cube right inside of it. We're going to let roots come down through, and then our last main supply, we're going to fill it with Hydroton. So Hydroton is an expanded clay product. It traps a bit of moisture. It helps kind of maintain a really wet but not too wet environment for the roots, but also it gives structure. So we're going to get that rock wool cube down, roots through the bottom of the basket, and then surround the plant to a certain extent with the Hydroton. And you can stack it up a little bit around it. And one of my seedlings, its main stem's a little floppy, so we are going to use the Hydroton as a support structure for while it's small, and then the plant will kind of grow around it. But because the Hydroton is this very, very light, pebbly product, the plant has the potential for pushing it out of the way. All right, now another word on Hydroton. When it comes to you, or you pick it up at a grocery store, it's going to be in a big bag and it's very powdery. So you want to soak your Hydroton. I just take a spare bucket, fill it up with water. Doesn't even have to be pH balanced if you don't want. And I let it soak and I kind of stir it around for a couple of days. This settles out all of the dust, and so you're not incorporating that into your system and then kind of ending up with a slurry in the bottom of your bucket. Whatever bucket you soak your Hydroton in, you will notice a very clear film on the bottom. That's what you've cleaned out. So before you're ready, get your Hydroton in a bucket, fill it with water, stir it around a couple times. I like to let it sit for 2 days. Every time I walk by, I give it a quick stir. Not much to it, but it does make for a better grow when it's properly rinsed and saturated with water. Okay, so let's take a look at our seedlings. Here we are. Tomatoes did pretty well. Those are nice and strong. Here's that little weak one I was talking about. It's plenty healthy. It's just its stem is not as stout and it's tending to lean. So when we put it in, we're going to support it around the stem with a little bit of Hydroton and keep an eye on it. The cilantro, not so amazing. So I've got 3 cubes that have germinated here. And then I have, unfortunately, it looks like I got 5 that didn't. I'm going to go ahead and transplant all of these. My plan initially was to do 3 or 4 cubes of cilantro in each basket, because it's a small plant. It's a little bushy thing, and we're going to be progressively harvesting it and letting it grow some more. I'm hoping those seeds that haven't germinated along with the other ones will catch up. They may not. We'll just kind of have to see. All right, let's start getting these into their baskets. Okay, so this may be really, really obvious to some folks and may not be to others, but when you're dealing with a tiny tent, and remember, this is only 3 foot square on the bottom, 6 foot tall, start with your basket that's all the way in the back. Reaching around plants is not that big of a deal, but if you work back to front, you're going to save yourself a little bit of labor and potentially, especially when they're tiny seedlings, brushing something and damaging the plant. So I'm starting with the basket from my far back corner. Going to get the plant settled, put that one in, then I'll do the far other corner and work towards myself. I'm going to be doing 2 buckets of tomatoes. Those will be in the back because they're taller. It's going to be easier to manage them there with the shorter cilantro up front. All right, first order of business, let's get a tomato plant into a basket. Now, as you pick up your rockwool cubes, be delicate. These plants have been establishing roots, and so here's my little weak one, and you can get a great view here. That's a pretty solid root structure. So I'm guessing this little guy is a little bit on the limp side because the roots haven't really beefed up at all. So I like to try and orient a few of the roots very gently downward, just so they have an easier time descending into the water basket. Be careful, be so gentle with these as you do this, because it's very easy to damage these itty bitty tiny roots. But if we can get them more oriented down, they're going to descend through the basket and get into the water a little bit faster, make for a stronger plant. There we go. Now that nice long one's descending. Another one here in a kind of similar orientation. So gently, don't let them break. Oh, there you go. That's what you want to try and avoid. The plant won't die off from that, but you do want to minimize the trauma. There we go. See, those are just, I'm hardly grasping them at all. All right. There we go. Now we got a couple good descending roots. Take your basket, and then it's going to be a little hard to show on camera, but target yourself right over a couple of the holes in the basket. Now, some baskets do have big central holes in them, which can make this part easier, but sometimes they have weaker bottoms. So, you can see I've got one root there. It's pretty hard to see, but some of the little tiny ones are descending a little bit. All right. Now let's get some hydroton in there. Gentle. Just put it around the edges of the piece of rock wool here, because we're going to support the rock wool itself, and then we'll fill in a little bit more higher up to help support the plant, so it's standing upright, and it gives it a little bit better odds in terms of developing that stronger primary stem. Okay, so initially this is what you want to see. And you can see I've got the hydroton around the rock wool cube. Nothing too crazy going on there. Protected that little root. We do have to be kind of quick here because that root's going to dry out really fast. So I'm going to go ahead and put it into the bucket so it's surrounded by moisture, and then we'll pack up a little bit of hydroton around the plant to help support that primary stem. Okay, basket number 2. And I almost dropped the tomato. All right, here we go. This is a prime. Look at nice strong taproot coming down. Lots of little tiny roots kind of around the edge. This is all going to branch out through the hydroton and really give us a robust root base. So again, we're going to go through the hole. And getting it in there is always a little tricky, but it is 100% worth your effort. All right, there we go. Good strong root coming through there, and you can even see some of the branching already on the root that came through. We're going to get that hydroton around it, then get it into the bucket. All right, let's get a little cilantro in there. Okay, so now when it comes to smaller plants, bushier ones, they're not going to develop that big taproot that larger plants like tomatoes like to produce. But when you check them, you will see a little bit of a root structure coming out. So I'm not going to be so worried about trying to get these right over a hole. I'm going to do a couple of these and spread them out around the basket and then pack the hydroton around it. All right, there we go. So we've got 2 of the cubes that did germinate cilantro plants, and then 2 that I'm being a little hopeful for. So I will not add more hydroton to this until the plants have established a little bit more, because we don't want to overshadow them, prevent them from growing, stunt them at all. Whereas those tomato plants are so much taller that we can be a little bit more liberal. All right, last basket, we're going to get the last of the cilantro in there. Okay, here we go. So we have all 4 of our pots going here. We have cilantro. And this cube here, this one actually produced 2 plants. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully those other 2 cubes there will germinate and catch up. This one, just one lonely cube that did sprout 2 plants, so that's encouraging, but we'll see how the rest go. And then here is our tomato plant that had that weaker stem, and if you look closely here, I've packed the hydroton all the way around, but very, very loosely. And the stronger one here, I did the same thing, because tomato plants have an interesting property that they share with a few other plants, but all those little hairs that run up and down the stem there, they have the possibility of turning into roots. And so the moisture of the hydroton clay that's around them may let it establish more roots. This is the same reason why sometimes gardeners will actually lay tomato seedlings down and then let them grow back upright in soil growing. All right, so it's time to go ahead and get the light programmed as well as the fans and let these grow. Okay, here we are inside the AC Infinity app, and we're going to go ahead and set up the lamps, the fan, and then the ducting. So let's open it up here. Ducting fan I have on plug 1, lights I have on plug 2, and my fans, I have both of them actually wired in using a USB splitter into port 3. Port 4 I have empty right now. Later on, as the plants are bigger, I'm going to actually be using a switch controller from AC Infinity to turn my side fluorescent grow lights on and off on their own cycling. The reason for this is the light in port 2 is AC Infinity's device, and it can be dimmed and has much more fine control. The LED strips I'm using on the sides are just on or off, and so I want to control them independently. Okay, let's get into each bit here, and we're going to start out with the ducting fan. So all of these devices have the same different control options. You've off, on, auto, VPD cycle, timer to on, timer to off, and schedule. Not all of these make sense for all devices. So you can go in and actually define separate levels, and yes, off can be given a on type value. I just leave that one on 0. On, so this would be manually switching on like a light switch, and then you have this throttle like control that you can use. Auto, this is a nice one for the ducting fan in my opinion, because the ducting fan is a great way of helping tweak your temperature. So you can give it a high constraint and a low constraint. A lot of times I just take advantage of the high. So if I know that I don't want my tomatoes getting over 85-ish degrees, so 85 is where I will set it. And then you can also have a humidity trigger, and this can be really important when it comes to controlling things like powdery mildew. So I like to use, again, the high setting here, and then I'm going to knock this down to 70%. That just seems to work well in my use case. And again, I'm not in a situation where I'm dealing with a low end for this, so I'm actually going to stick with auto here. And I have both of those constraints, my temperature as well as my humidity mark set, and we can move on to the light. All right, so like I mentioned, all devices that you attach to an AC Infinity controller have the same potential tools in terms of switching them on and off. This is a place where I like the schedule button because it just gives me clock times. So right now, my last program was set up to turn on at 4 a.m. and turn off at 10 p.m. This gives me 18 hours of light and 6 hours of dark, exactly what these seedlings need. Now, when you are using the schedule, there is something else you have to take into account. We go back into here, and if we go to on, we can see that the light is set to 5, so half intensity. The brightness, whether you're using the on and off settings or if you're using the schedule, are controlled inside the on feature. So these are seedlings. 5 is actually a more appropriate level. You don't want to burn them. And you also need to bring the lamp down. I've found 24 inches away from the top of my plants is a really choice place to start. But after you've set that on setting, go back and activate your schedule again. Now, it is worth pointing out one other thing. Inside the off feature, you can turn it on. I'm not entirely certain why this is the case. To set a off level, perhaps maybe there's a plant out there that does best when it has very, very low light during its off cycle, its nighttime phase, and then wants brighter light during its on or its daytime phase. Just be aware, if for some reason your light is not turning off, check the off settings and make sure that's all the way down here at 0. All right, so off is set to 0, on is set to 5. So we're going to go ahead and activate that schedule. Looks good. All right, fans. So these would be the oscillating, circulating fans. Again, we got all the same options here. I like cycle for these because I'm not really concerned necessarily what time of day this is happening. I just want to make sure it's happening and we have a little oscillation between on and off with that extra air movement. So I have my setup here for on duration of 1 hour and 0 minutes, and then the off duration is 15 minutes. I'm sure there's a lot of different arguments for what's best or what's not. I found this does an excellent job. It keeps the air moving, it helps reduce my risks of powdery mildew, and those off cycles make sure that I'm not over fatiguing my plants, because there's not very many plants that are meant to be in the wind all the time. Light is about 24 inches away from the top of the plants and half intensity. Circulatory fans are doing their thing. They're going to be on that on-off cycle. Vent is attached, so that's going to be able to vent out the space if it gets a little too warm or a little too humid. And then last but not least, I am going to be watching the humidity of the tent as well as the condition of those rock wool cubes and the plants themselves for the first few days. When things are nice and open like this, you don't always need a humidifier. I have one on the ready, and we will actually feed that in through the side and let it fog all over the plants if it's needed. And the other thing that might be necessary, again, this is going to be based on the plants, is top watering. So sometimes when you set up a crack key system or a recirculating deep water culture system like this one, it takes a little extra oomph to get the roots to descend into the water. Not always. If it looks like your plants aren't doing so hot, then you can add top watering. If that ends up being the case, we'll walk right through that process too. Last but not least, I have my UVC and ozone bulb here on a timer. It turns on for 15 minutes once a day when I know nobody's going to be near or opening up the tent, because both UVC and ozone are not the best thing for humans. And this just helps keep the tent as clean as possible, combating things like powdery white mildew, which can be an absolute nightmare inside a grow tent. All right, folks. There you have it. Our plants are in the tent and ready to roll. Nope, we're going to have to keep an eye on that cilantro. We'll see. I'm really hoping those last couple seeds choose to germinate and pop up there. But they're looking in good shape, and I think they've got a really strong start. Those tomatoes are definitely going to be interesting. I've never grown those two species of tomatoes. Sometimes this stuff works out great. Other times it's in there scratching your head the whole time. So as you go forward in your grow, I'm going to give you a couple tips that are going to carry you forward. One, pay attention to your plants. Now, the Growee Pro system is going to record an awful lot of data for you. You can go back into its history log and track what has been going on with your nutrients, your temperature, your pH, and that gives you a great look into what your plants are doing, especially if you're troubleshooting. But nothing can do better than your own two eyes. So keep a clipboard or even just a scrap of paper by your tent, so when you see changes in your plants, you can write it down, date it, because plants aren't going to necessarily change overnight unless something catastrophic has happened to them. But even in those cases, having a running list of your observations that you can match up with the data that the Growee Pro is providing you makes a big difference in terms of course correcting and making sure you get the most out of your grow. Now don't forget, Growee has sponsored this entire video series, and if you follow the link below in the description, it'll take you right to their website. Lots of great information directly from them if you're curious about possibly buying your own Growee system. If you sign up for their newsletter, there's also going to be a 5% discount coupon that's sent your way. So why not cash in on some savings? Now, if you choose to buy Growee Pro or any of the items I've listed down in the description, there may be a small commission that comes to me, and that commission goes a long way to helping me produce more content. I really appreciate your consideration. If you're going to buy something, using one of those links really does help. All right, there you have it. Have a lot of fun with your grows. Make sure you're patient, make sure you give yourself the time and keep those notes running, because those things will give you a glimpse into what your plants need from you to be as productive as they can. All right, until next time, keep having fun and make sure you plant it all.